Thank you so much. Welcome back to the stage. So we are going to open up a Q&A to the audience. But before we do, I want to start by asking you all how you begin to tackle a topic so vast. And I know that this collaboration was over 5 years. So if you could tell us a little bit about that process, that would be great.
Okay. Well, it was interesting because we started with the categories that the Anthropocene scientists had put together, and we distilled them a bit to our own needs. But like anthroturbation, technofossils, many of these things, climate change, were things that they were working with. So we used them as our head categories, and quite frankly, in the work that we've done in the past and the work that I've done in the past, these, we had already been familiar with those subjects. So what we tried to do, by and large, was to search for the greatest examples that kind of had two check boxes. One, that visually it was compelling, that it drew us in, and it had scale to it, because we wanted to really show the scale and the impact of human intervention in the landscape. So those are the real things that we looked for, and we parsed like thousands of images, and we had this board in my office, and we just kept moving images around using stuff that we found on the internet or research through books. And we had 4 researchers on and off on the project over 2 years just to get down to the subject matter.
I mean, has anybody read Elizabeth Colbert's The Sixth Extinction? It's a great book, if you haven't. And there's a chapter that she kind of mentions the Anthropocene Working Group, and she talks a bit about what they're doing, and she talks about this idea of the epoch. And when we were talking about doing another project, and I remember saying, I'm not doing another amorphous film about water, which is just like a huge subject that has no structure. And so then these scientists, and we thought, wow, this is a filter for looking at impact, and they became a kind of focusing point for us that was really incredible. They were the inspiration and the research really for the whole thing.
And when we started, we hoped for the film, and we were led to believe that there might actually be a kind of crucible moment in the work of this group, who have to present this evidence to a very conservative governing body, the International Commission on Stratigraphy. And these are all geologists, and they move quite slowly, we find. So there was no vote in the time period that we were filming in.
5-year time period.
We were hoping they would vote, there would be a kind of Hollywood ending, and yes, we're in the epoch, and there wasn't. So in the end, I think it was the ideas that they were passing back and forth amongst themselves in their research, which was getting more defined. But that became, for us, the really interesting central organizing principle.
Are there any questions out there? Yes, right here.
Question for Edward. Edward, what was the technically most challenging sequence? And Jennifer, were there places you wanted to go to pick the expedition?
So the question is first for Edward, what were the most technically challenging places you went? And then I'll go to Jennifer after.
Well, I think the underground mine in Berezniki was actually one of the most intriguing and challenging locations. Number one, there's no light down there, and so you have to bring in all the light. And number two, there was we got a chance to play with some new technology called photogrammetry, and we were able to shoot. There's a shot where you're looking at one of those medallions, and it pulls back, and it goes, and it pushes into another one. Well, that was a 3D software that pulled together probably like 15,000 images, rendered in computer, and that is actually a reality rendered within the computer, and then the shot is a rendering through the data. So because there's no way you could light that underground in the mine. So technically, I would say that was kind of really a challenging, interesting kind of feat.
And the question for Jennifer was, where did you want to go that you couldn't get to?
Well, there were a number of locations. I tried to resurrect the location of Lake Karachay in Russia, which I wanted to do for Watermark, and Ed and Nick said no way, because You have to wear a hazmat suit just to stand in front of it. It's one of the most radioactive places on Earth. So that was no. I tried to do that again. And it looks like an ordinary lake. And then we tried to go to the Spratly Islands. Do you remember that? Because, yeah, China, these sort of created islands in the South China Sea, and literally our producer fixer in China, Noah Weinswig, said, "We'll be shot by just even trying to go there. We're not going." And he's usually game for a challenge, but I will say that in Norilsk, and it took us a year to get access to Norilsk. It's a very difficult place. Even ordinary Russians can't go there. It's a closed city for strategic reasons, because it has such important mines, and also because you can only fly in there. It's in Siberia. It's north of the Arctic Circle. So that took a long time. And then when we did get there, because we interviewed those women in the copper smelter, we literally got arrested, detained, and we were fingerprinted, and we were kept in this room until we admitted that we were journalists who had come in there with the purposes of kind of telling a terrible story about Norilsk. We said, "We're not. This is an art project. We're just showing this." And it went back and forth. They said, "You have to say you're journalists and you lied." And we said, "We're not saying that we lied." And it was hours and hours. And finally they let us go, but then they dogged the crew for the rest of the trip in Russia. So that was a bit scary.
Any other questions? Yes, down here.
You also tackled the human overpopulation issue that's sort of taboo even among many environmental groups and projects and documentaries. And I wonder if you could share your thoughts on that and solutions that are viable.
So the question is about the issue of overpopulation, and if you have any ideas about solutions that seem viable.
I'm not going to try and answer. I can't answer that question, of course. But I think it maybe loops us back to the philosophy of our approach, the non-prescriptive, non-didactic kind of witnessing, and we've probably gone farther, in the line in the sand in this one, in terms of an agenda. But there's a place for polemic filmmaking. God love the people who have that argument and their own agenda and the courage of their convictions, and they can be very persuasive. Absolutely. I think our philosophy is more, let's try and witness and bring as many people into this, because we're all implicated. These things aren't happening over there. This is a global perspective that we're trying to show in this film, and so the solutions are all of us. It's not pointing fingers. It's not dividing. So what the solutions are, I don't know. I'm a filmmaker and a cinematographer, but the hope is that by making a film like this and by trying to ripple it out in as wide a pool as possible, hopefully all around the world, the more people who see it will have their own transformation, their own answer to those questions in things that are immediate to them and within their capacities and competencies.
We have time for one more question.
So I'm curious as to the process of getting access, kind of piggybacking on the previous question, with particularly industrial landscapes where they're very sensitive, I'm sure, to media attention. If you could just kind of talk about the process of gaining access, particularly the subway, the underground tunnel shot, like I can't even fathom what that conversation is.
So it's another question about access to some of these locations, and what is the process of gaining access, especially to the tunnel?
I think Ed should answer, because he's been doing it all of his life, and so successfully, and it's an enormous amount of work. But just specifically to the Swiss tunnel, I can't believe they let me and Mike Reed strap the pipes and everything to the front of that train. And the engineer was showing off and got up to 200 kilometers an hour. And oh, please don't, It's it's full of people.
No, they let us go all the way through the tunnel, and those opening ceremonies, if you can believe it, that's all real. Like they did that. They did that. It's a little crazy. But we should talk about about Humbug, because that mine with the Bagger 291. Now there's the 293, which is even bigger than the Bagger 291. It is the biggest mine in Germany, and I don't know. I think they kind of knew when we were there.
Well, they originally said no, and then I found out through my dealer in Berlin that one of my collectors of my work sits on the board of RWE. He may not be collecting my work anymore after this state. That's what I'm worried about. But it's kind of trying to find, the first thing is you don't accept no as an answer, because that's always the first answer. Why bother? Why, even invite the possibility of controversy to come into their corporation or whatever. So I always expect a no or a very, very cool response as the first response. And then it's a slow chipping away at it. And I think it's also very important that, our work is always kind of taking the position that, it's revelatory, not accusatory. So we're not saying that you're bad or good. This is a necessary process to provide for the ever-growing populations, 7.5 billion moving to 8. It takes a lot of scale in that, and we often point out to the corporations, the reason why we're at your doorstep is that you are the largest example of a coal mine in the world, or you have the largest machine in the world. And I think that intrigues the corporations in that, they appreciate that they're doing something and they're providing a service to humanity at a scale, and we're there as a kind of interpreters of that scale to kind of bridge that disconnect that we all have in urban centers to the kinds of things that are necessary out in the world that provide for our daily lives. So when we coach it and couch it in that way, it starts to soften up. And often, like Russia was a year and a half, RWE was a year and a half. It's letter writing, it's just cajoling and letting them know that it's up to you. We're letting them know it's a fairly neutral position. It's not saying you're bad. It's just saying this is one of the processes that we're engaged in. But all of it accumulated, as this film points out, is starting to create huge problems for the planet.
We're all bad. Not just you, but all of us are bad. That lignite mine, if you can believe that it's still profitable for them to have relocated all of those towns, literally 2 more. So imagine 6 towns, a whole highway had to be moved for it's called lignite, soft brown coal, which is not a particularly efficient form of coal, but still necessary for Germany's energy use. So,
Ed, Jennifer, Nick, thank you so much for the film, and thank you guys for being here.